We bid you welcome. We do not ask what you believe or expect you to think a certain way, but only that you try to live a kindly, helpful life with the dignity proper to a human being. Welcome all who believe that religion is wider than any sect and deeper than any set of opinions. Welcome all who might find in our friendship strength and encouragement for daily living.
Emily Greene Balch was a Unitarian, then a Quaker, and an avowed absolute pacifist. However, she concluded that after the attack on Pearl Harbor, it would be impossible for any government not to retaliate. Deeply disturbed by Hitler's Germany, she reluctantly made an exception in her pacifist position and supported the U.S. involvement in the Second World War.
Good morning. And welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Farmington. My name is Nathan Whitehead. I've been a member of this church for about 8 years or so. Reverend Glenn is out of the pulpit today, so I am thankful that I get the opportunity to lead us in service today, and am joined by longtime member Paul Bailey, who, as he gave a little bit of a foreshadowing of there, will give us another portrait of someone from our church's past. I'd like to extend a special welcome today to any visitors. After the service, we invite you to gather with us at the back of the meeting house and outside. But while indoors, we are observing COVID precautions and wearing masks regardless of vaccination status. We do have religious education classes that are being held downstairs. There's no kids here. We have joys and sorrows, which will be shared later in the service. You are welcome to come up to the microphone, or there are blue cards in the pews that you can give to an usher that can be passed forward up here, and I can read those for you if you'd like. Or you can also text me. My phone number is at the top of page 2 in the order of service. Please include your name if you text, though, so I know who is sending me these messages. As we begin our service, we remember that our UU principles begin with our pledge to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome into our community people of all races, sexual orientations, gender identities, and belief systems. Were there any announcements this morning? We do have one.
From the membership committee. If you have checked your email at all, you'll see that we have a lot of stuff coming up this year. I'm sorry, I got to catch my breath. I was forgetting that I had to do this. So we have coming up, I'm trying to find my email real quick. I really appreciate it. Your patience here for a moment. So first coming up, Talk to Tom. We're going to be hitting a soccer game and downtown, and it sounds like a hoot, a ton of fun. You can just buy your own tickets. We'll meet up there. That will be on the 18th of June, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And we have, on 6/26, we'll be saying goodbye to Reverend Glenn, so please come on out so we can listen to his final sermon. And then we'll have a special coffee hour to help wish him luck in his future endeavors. We have 7/16, the Founders Day Parade, where we will be marching again. And then we're also going to be doing 2 sales towards the end of August. We're going to host a homeschool book and curriculum sale that'll be in the parking lot. It'll be a service to the community, some publicity, and also if anybody has any learning materials, books, or anything that they might want to donate to a donation table where we can sell from, make a few extra dollars that way. We'll also be doing a mom-to-mom sale a few weeks later. That's August 5th and August 26th. So again, any children's items, clothes that you might have to donate to us to do that, we'll send out further information, but any of those items can just be put in a bin that we'll have at the back of the church. And of course, in between there, we're gonna have our summer picnic. Hopefully this year it'll be able to be big and happy and lots of people. And we're gonna be trying out Drake Sports Park this year, which is just down the road a few miles. So I think that's all from us. The date of the picnic, sorry, and thank you, is 8/7. No, August 7th. Okay, so sorry for not knowing what I'm talking about, but I swear I sort of do. So save the dates, get them on your calendar, and hope to see you all there.
Thank you very much. And if there's so many things going on, so if for some reason you are not receiving that e-blast, let somebody know, because lots of cool things for you to keep track of. All right. And could you also, just a reminder to silence your phones. All right, and now please join me in stating our mission. We seek answers everywhere, include everyone, and live with compassion. And please rise as you are willing and able for our first hymn, number 118, This Little Light of Mine.
From a thesis submitted to the Graduate College of Marshall University for the degree of Master of Arts History by Tara S. Lambert, Marshall University, Huntington, West Virginia, May 2002. Emily Greene Balch was the second American woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize and worked throughout her lifetime to better the world for her fellow humans. She has never received the historical spotlight given to others in her time. A survivor of protest against war, she has virtually been ignored despite her many activities and writings on behalf of peace, suffrage, and social reform. Mercedes Randall, who wrote the only biography of Balch, fails to fully examine her impact upon the peace movements of the 20th century. It is for this reason that this author proposes an examination of Balch's work and influence that she had upon the national and international peace movements during her lifetime. Balch had great interest in the areas of social justice and suffrage, but peace ultimately became the major focus of her attention. Most historians ignore her by not including her work and influence in writings about the national and international peace effort of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It may be that Balch's own changing views from that of an absolute pacifist during World War I compromised her place in the peace movement as she reconsidered her pacifist position during World War II. As Balch's social consciousness evolved during the events leading up to World War II, she began to realize that the world was headed for another conflict of even greater proportion than the previous war. She knew from her personal observations while visiting post-war Europe to attend the Hague Conference in 1919 just what war and conflict could do to the individuals who lived through it. After enormous inner struggle, she found herself supporting the war effort and assisting European refugees who wished to immigrate to the U.S. Emily lost the respect of many of her fellow pacifists for supporting World War II. An examination of her life's activities in the peace movements can answer the questions regarding why she should be included in any analysis of peace in American history. Examination of her work may also advance our understanding of the influence that she had upon the peace movements of her time.
Paul Bailey is a longtime member here at UUCF. He enjoys men's lunches and as well as daytimers, and he loves giving us stories of fascinating people from our church's history. And so with that, Paul?
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Sunday Services Committee for allowing me to speak today. It is indeed an honor. Thank you very much. Also, a special thank you to Diana for all her work with the music. Oh, there you are over there. You get a break for a little bit, huh? This is Memorial Day weekend, so I'd like to read just a few excerpts from a Decoration Day speech, 1880, by Colonel Robert Ingersoll. This is a day for gratitude and love. On this day, we honor the heroes who fought to make our nation just and free. We honor men and women who made America the hope and beacon of the human race, the foremost nation of the world. What of those who died? They died for liberty. They died for us. They are at rest. Upon their tombs we have lovingly laid the wealth of spring. This is a day for memory and tears. A mighty nation bends above its honored graves and pays to noble dust the tribute of its love. There is no language to express the debt we owe, the love we bear to all the dead who died for us. Words are but barren sounds. We can but stand beside their graves, and in the hush and silence feel what speech has never told. Emily Greene Balch was a member of the first generation of American women to attend college in significant numbers. She had 3 groundbreaking careers: social reform, the teaching of economics at Wellesley College, and international political activity. Born to a prosperous family of liberal Unitarian persuasion, Balch grew up in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts, with a belief in goodwill, hard work, and hope as a discipline, as well as a theological virtue. She was able to work alongside such notable writers as Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Unitarian, and Edward Pierce, who were responsible for much influence upon the Balch children through their writings. Emily Greene Balch's biographer, Mercedes Randall, described the atmosphere in which Balch was reared with her sisters Annie, Elizabeth, Marion, and brother Francis. Balch's mother, Ellen, first introduced to Emily the world of literature as she read out loud to her children from an early age. Emily was sent to private schools in Boston, where she received an excellent foundation in academics. Another close relative, Aunt Catherine Noyes, known affectionately as Auntie, taught Emily to read before she went to school, which led her to her deep love of reading. Emily recalled, "The minister at our Unitarian church was Charles Dole. His warm faith in the force that makes for righteousness became the chief of all the influences that played upon my life. He asked us to enlist in the service of goodness, whatever its cost. In accepting this pledge, I never abandoned in any degree my desire to live up to it." In late 1884, Emily became interested in attending college. She said, "I decided to go to college when to do so was to feel oneself a marked character in the neighborhood, when returning as a college graduate meant to be constantly met with the would-be amusing protest that people were afraid to talk with me, I was so learned. The same people felt no awe, as I well knew, of a college boy, and I could not see why my very modest undergraduate studies should be more of a barrier than his." She received her A.B. in Greek and Latin as a member of Benoit's first graduating class in 1889. The faculty, citing her extraordinary moral character, awarded her the highest honor, their European Fellowship, allowing her to study poverty alleviation policies for a year at Sorbonne University, Paris, an experience she found disappointing because her research never brought her into contact with the poor. On her return from Paris in 1892, she was determined to join the emerging female social reform movement in Boston. In that year, she founded Boston's first settlement house, Denison House, in Jamaica Plain, where she lived for several months as its head. During that time, she began what would become a lifelong friendship and working relationship with later to be Nobel laureate Jane Addams. After working as a reformer for a few years, she decided she would be of greatest use to the social reform movement as a teacher who might instill the social reform drive in the growing numbers of women attending college. To prepare for a college teaching career, she studied at Radcliffe, which later became Harvard, the University of Chicago, and the University of Berlin for 1 year. In the early 20th century, many Americans favored immigration limits for Slavic Europeans. Balch combined a settlement worker's interest in immigrants with academic discipline. In 1904 and 5, she took a sabbatical and lived in Austria and Hungary and in Slavic neighborhoods in the U.S. in order to research the conditions of Slavs in the Old and New Worlds. In order to complete her research, she took an additional year's leave from Wellesley College without pay. While in Austria and Hungary, her politics became more radical of her decision to become a socialist. She wrote, "It was in Prague in 1906 that one unbearably bleak winter morning, I saw a man fumbling with his bare fingers in an ash barrel in search of something to eat. Heaven knows I had seen enough of misery, actual starvation in 1893 in Boston, but the bare fingers in the icy ashes were somehow final." Balch's years of research resulted in her major work, Our Slavic Fellow Citizens, 1910. The Dictionary of American Biography noted that the book was unique not only in presenting the first-hand viewpoints of immigrants, but also in countering the nativist racial assumptions of her society. In 1913, Balch became Wellesley's chair of the Department of Economics and Sociology. She was an outspoken, active pacifist throughout the First World War. She joined the American delegation to the International Congress of Women at The Hague, 1915, and played a constructive part. Women and nearly all Americans, including President Woodrow Wilson, were on the whole ignorant of European power politics. They were provincial and, except for a body of immigrants, little interested in European and Asiatic affairs. With her training abroad and her knowledge of languages, Emily was a notable exception to this lack of interest. At the end, Balch was chosen as one of the 6 envoys to go directly from the Congress to see the chief statesmen of various neutral and belligerent governments in Europe and to President Wilson in the U.S. to urge upon them a concrete plan for attaining an early peace. Balch's speeches were in all 3 of the official languages, French, German, and English. Julia Wales, a Canadian delegate, described the impression Balch made on the members. She was outstanding both for the distinguished quality of her work as an officer and on important committees for her delightful personality. All were impressed by her charm, keen intellect, never-failing sense of humor, wit, and skill in debate. Also her expert knowledge in the fields of both politics and economics. The Congress drafted a series of proposals which attempted to offer a basis for a just peace. On her return home, Jane Addams presented these Hague propositions to President Wilson. Many of them were later embodied in his famous 14 points. In 1918, Balch was dismissed from the Wellesley faculty, ostensibly for her long absences on behalf of the International Congress of Women, but in fact for her anti-war views. She began writing for The Nation magazine, and in 1919 founded the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom with Jane Addams. As a Women's International League for Peace and Freedom member, she contributed to the first public criticisms of the Versailles Treaty. Gunnar John, chairman of the Nobel Committee, would later state, "It would have been wise to listen to what the women had to say, but there were few who would pay any attention." As a key builder of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, she championed the inclusion of minorities, the expansion of the member nations, and the democratization of WILP's structure. Balch's accomplishments and interest reflect a broad interest in world and human affairs and an abundance of energy. She organized the Third International Congress in Vienna in 1921. In that year, she became a member of the Society of Friends, Quakers, in part because of its unwavering pacifist philosophy. She continued to press for greater acceptance of refugees into the 1930s. Her book, Refugees as Assets, 1930, was an argument for U.S. acceptance of refugees from Nazi Germany for economic, cultural, as well as humanitarian reasons. She personally helped dozens of such refugees relocate to the U.S. As the 30s progressed, she spoke out against the growing trend of isolationist politics of a generous, idealistic, and non-self-regarding kind. Emily Balch was a Quaker and an avowed absolute pacifist during World War I. During World War II, however, she found herself involved in a personal struggle against what she saw as the two evils, that of total world war and Hitler's Nazi Germany. Balch saw the First World War as a power struggle between nations that could have been dealt with by diplomacy. Now she concluded that the Second World War was more than a mere battle between the Allies and the Axis powers. It was now a literal battle between good and evil. Balch felt that in this instance, war was more preferable to the cruelty and hatefulness of Hitlerism, not alone exemplified in the concentration camps and hideous mistreatment of Jews, but in its whole character and purpose. She concluded after the attack on Pearl Harbor that it would be impossible for any government not to retaliate. Deeply disturbed by Hitler's Germany, she reluctantly made an exception in her pacifist position and supported U.S. involvement in the Second World War. She explained, "A small barking dog cannot stop a dashing train. Fascism today can be destroyed only through means which are capable of impressing the brutal men of fascism. We women pacifists have come to recognize this without even for a moment becoming untrue to our pacifist convictions." Balch, writing to Clara Ragaz in Switzerland, said, "About my attitude toward the war, it is chiefly that on the political plane, a state may have to choose between alternative evil possibilities, making war or acquiescing in the progress of the conqueror toward existing liberty everywhere, and setting up the policies exemplified in the German treatment of the Jews and in the Gestapo, etc. Many people who were pacifists in the First World War were not pacifists in the Second. Bertrand Russell said, Hitler taking over all of Europe would be a permanent threat to democracy. Opinion was much more nearly unanimous concerning the necessity of engaging in the war against Hitler. All Quakers exhorted their members, as did the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom and the Fellowship of Reconciliation and the War Resisters League, to hold in respect and sympathetic understanding all those who in good conscience felt that war was necessary or inevitable, to feel with them the sacrifices they might be called upon to make and to share in their suffering and grief. Writing in 1942 to Rabbi Wise, president of World Jewish Congress, upon first learning of the mass murder of Jews in Europe, she wrote, "Those of us who are not Jews are oppressed by a sense of our own responsibility, for we too are guilty. We are all answerable in part for the development of a state of things where the moral insanity of Hitler's Germany was possible, and for a state of things where the civilized world can find no better way out than competition in reciprocal slaughter and destruction." During the war years, when Emily was between the ages of 72 and 78, she helped relocate Japanese Americans who had been forcibly interned in American-style concentration camps. As a testimony to her long work in the peace movement, many of her friends and co-workers started a campaign to nominate her for the 1946 Nobel Peace Prize. Heading the committee was the well-known scholar and educator John Dewey. He was instrumental in shaping the process of educational reform in the American public school system and involved in peace work, women's rights, and labor reform movements. In his letter to solicit the necessary backing for Emily Balch's nomination, he had the following to say: "She is being nominated by high-ranking and influential sponsors both in Europe and America. Owing to her constant travels, her knowledge of languages, her active connections with international organizations, and her cosmopolitan temperament, her work has been peculiarly international in character, quite transcending national limitations. Because of her unique record of 30 or more years devoted exclusively to pioneering in methods of peace, 20 in closest collaboration with her friend and colleague Jane Addams, Nobel Peace Prize winner in 1931, she has come to be recognized as the Dean of the American Peace Movement." Labor Secretary Francis Perkins also wrote a letter of recommendation. He noted that Balch had done work both on the national and international levels for peace. She is a woman of first-rate intellect and education and a pioneer in the movement for better social conditions in the U.S. I have known her certainly since 1910 and have observed her work on a minimum wage board of the state of Massachusetts, in the Women's Trade Union Legislation of America, and on the commissions on immigration policy. Her scholarly career has been one of distinction. As a full professor of political economy and social science, she has done much to promote among students a knowledge of the social problems out of which political action in modern times has grown. Within the U.S., she has done much to promote understanding between the citizens of various radical and national backgrounds. Her book, called Our Slavic Fellow Citizens, 1910, is only one of the major efforts in that direction. Some of the other members of the nominating committee were many of her friends and former co-workers. Alice Hamilton, first woman professor of medicine at Harvard University Medical School and fellow member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom; Elizabeth Kendall, professor of history, Wellesley College; Sofan Seba Breckenridge, professor of social service, University of Chicago; and Oswald Garrison Villard, former owner and editor of The Nation magazine. A sponsor whose support for Balch's nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize received much publicity was that of Mildred McAfee Horton, president of Wellesley College. This sponsorship of Balch was of interest because Horton was a high-ranking naval officer, having been commander of the Waves Women's Corps during World War II. It also received much attention because this was the same Wellesley College that had not renewed Emily's reappointment as chair of the Department of Political Economy and Political Science after the end of World War I in 1919, due to the very same peace work that she was being honored for now. Emily Greene Balch was awarded the 1946 Nobel Peace Prize the very first time her name had been proposed. Gunnar John, the Nobel Committee chairman, pointed out why Balch was worthy of the prize, noting that her activities in peace and social justice amounted to about 60 years. He concluded his speech with the fact that she was not well known, as she had never been one to seek the limelight. She has taught us that the reality we seek must be earned by hard and unrelenting toil in the world in which we live. But she has taught us more, that exhaustion is unknown, and defeat only gives fresh courage to the person whose soul is fired by the sacred flame. Typical of Balch, she gave her prize money to the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. For her extraordinary contributions to world peace, she became the third woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Her close friend Jane Addams had been the second. The first was Bertha von Suttner in 1905. In her Nobel acceptance speech, Emily said, "We are not asked to subscribe to any utopia or to believe in a perfect world. We are asked to equip ourselves with courage, hope, readiness for hard work, and to cherish the large and generous ideals." Although she had many friends, she insisted on living alone and never married. In her old age, lack of money forced her to live in a nursing home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She remained intellectually active and was in close and constant contact with a loving and extended family and a supportive network of friends. She died in Cambridge in 1961 at the age of 94. In 1996, Wellesley College, the Jamaica Plain Unitarian Church, and the International League for Peace and Freedom jointly held commemorations of the 50th anniversary of the Nobel Peace Prize winner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. That was great. As we listen to the music and take the offering, we acknowledge the generosity and intention to support and build this welcoming committee. If you are visiting us for the first time today and you're comfortable doing so, please stand and introduce yourself. Tell us how you heard about us. We'd like to meet you. And if not, we'll move on to joys and sorrows. A perfect heart is one that has known love and loss, joy and sorrow. The perfect heart is one that has been shared. As joys and sorrows of our community are shared, please direct your energy, prayers, and meditations as a gift of compassion.
Hi, Paul Bailey. I wanted to tell you about my wife. She's got some kind of allergy. Always getting allergies.
Thank you, everyone. All right, and now please rise as you are willing and able and join us in our second hymn, number 95, There Is More Love Somewhere.
The International League for Peace and Freedom initiated a campaign to nominate Balch for the Nobel Peace Prize. The campaign was supported by 5 U.S. organizations: the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, the National Federation of Settlements, the Women's Trade Union League of America, the National Council of Women of the USA, and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People.
Thank you. Go in peace and have a great week.